There was a human hubris by the time I walked in to the choir. I practiced. But that was wrong. And there's always things happen between you are so proud of yourself and at the same time the moment that you become very humble. You know, I don't know how many of you like fishing. You know, my dad is mad about fishing all the time. I mean, you know, he is, after the stroke, he cannot go to fish and so on. But the only reason that he is exercising fervently, eagerly, is that he may be able to go out and fishing. That's the only reason. So nowadays, I heard he probably twice a week, he went out freshwater fishing all the time, obviously bothering a lot of people who has to help him moving around and prepare all the fishing tools and so on. But, you know, I heard my dad's talking about how big a fish that he caught and so on, and I know that there's some blown up, some bluff that I need to inspect, and whether that is objectively, scientifically true or not. But, you know, I know that the fishers gather around and always boast about how big a fish that they ever caught and so on. The Texans are known for humility, right? The Texan fisherman is sitting next to another fisherman and talk about how big a fish they caught and so on. And I caught a 1.5 foot big one yesterday and so on. That was one of the biggest one I ever caught and so on. And this Texan says, yeah, I caught one about 6 inches. 6 inches, and you boast about 6 inches? And the Texans say, yeah, that's only between the eyes of the fish. Yeah, you always reserve the room to a hard blow that you are better than somebody else next to you. Yeah, it is a human hubris. I have to confess that I am, as a pastor, read through the names, which church they serve, and which capacity they serve in whatever the position in the conference. I travel through different positions in the conference. Yeah, I have to confess that with my job descriptions, I sometimes have what they call human hubris. Paul was very precise in saying that the faith community should not conform to the world, but the church should be the agent to transform the world. But how hard it is. We all know how hard it is. Looking at the United Presbyterian Church, United Methodist Church, Episcopal Church, and whatever that is, we claim that the body, the institution, the maintenance, and the manager of that, we have to have some command, order of command. We don't say it out loud, but there is a hierarchical order. There is a need for the maintaining the institution according to your experience, your quality of leadership, and so on and so forth. So there comes instinctively the sense of pride with those positions, even with the pastors. I remember preaching 8,000 folks in Seoul, Korea, called Qumran Church once. It was like preaching at baseball stadium, and you preach, and you don't know what the response of the congregation. The congregation is 8,000. And the pastor is surrounded by the secretaries of 11 and a staff of 400 and so on. And by the time that the church rolls in that way, the pastors naturally lost the touch with the congregants. What the pastor does there all the time is staff management. Yeah, it is evident. I remember in 1970s, early 1970s, when my dad, as a Methodist minister in Seoul, Korea, launched his campaign and the church got successful and breakthrough, first 1,000 member attending the Sunday service, and later on grew up to 10,000 in southern part of Korea. Whenever, from time to time, I visit them, I have an opportunity to preach to the congregation 4 times a Sunday, 7, 9, 11, and 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And each time, I feel that I am speaking to the audience, not the body of Christ. I don't know how you define me as far as my leadership goes. I agree with somebody said, and I read somewhere, that the church should be the church where pastor speaks without PA system that everybody can hear. Do you understand? If there is a sincere, real, caring relationship between pastor and the congregation, when pastors speak out like that without PA system, everybody should be able to listen to. That's the number, ideal number, where the pastor can be a shepherd and the congregation can really the friend and the sheep of the pastor. I still believe it has a lot of, it has some weight in its statement. The pastor, at times the churches, in a very competitive lifestyle, measure who has the largest church, who has bigger size of salary package, and so on. We do not talk about it, but at times we know. I know when I was a superintendent, we were joking that the most visited pages in the annual conference journal is the logistics. Who's where, which church, and what the salary package is. I'm sorry. Yeah. But I come to you, I want to be a pastor again. I could be less qualified than you think the pastor should be. But my best compliment was not the attendance. It's important, the size of budget, but something like this. I visited a friend of mine Friday afternoon, sat down with her and talked about her husband and how the life led and her concerns for the church and so on. And then by the time I shared the prayer and I left, on the doorstep, she said, "Thank you. Thank you for being my pastor." That's the greatest compliment that I can hear from the congregation. The humility in me defines often that it is not about thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking yourself less. Let me repeat. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less. In your mind, somebody else takes the priority. In the world of competition, world of coercive competition, and the survival defined in the very subjective way that the survival becomes luxury. Satisfy your all, the luxurious thought. You do not call that survival. It is an arrogance at times. It is a pride. Thinking about somebody else. Your hands are wet. Your forehead has the sweat. Your legs are sore for the sake of somebody else. The joy that can bring to you is enormous. Human hubris come in, and biblically in two ways. One, we often think that we don't die. I did hundreds of funeral and memorial services, and I did the baptism, and I did marriage, and so on. But I never thought that death is my agenda. I've seen the casket in the sanctuary. I've seen the graveyard services, and I led those hundreds of times. But at times, I feel that it's not going to be my agenda. Therefore, I can be arrogant and play with my pride and deceiving myself a little bit. I always think that way. And sometimes I was thinking so desperately that I need to have the issue of death mine so that my being alive will be real, truthful, and more enriched. That I wrote a sermon, the late Mr. Cheol. I did. It was quite strange. I start reading my eulogy. It is not about threatening you that you will be deceased, and you will leave this world. It is not a threat, but it is to make your moment of life more real, humble, not wasted in empty, useless pride and arrogance. Stop comparing yourself with others, but always be faithful to yourself. Can we do that? Can we do that? The second one is you gotta find the I. Let me say it one more time. Second nature of being arrogant and pride, of comparing with others, and you feel that you are better than the one next to you. The person with humble, the comparing with others and you are better is not an issue. The issue is that you are better than your former self. That's the issue. That's the man with a humility will practice. Godifying I stops there. Whenever you use the English and write down the sentences, when it comes to I that describes me as a subject, it always has to be capitalized. I don't know. I don't really know when in English start using that I has to be the capitalized I. I don't know. Which century? I don't know. It could be 2,000 years ago. It could be 1,600, whatnot. But the issue is that somehow we start looking at the job description of small God to ourselves. Some of the famous, the statement by one of the businessmen was that I am who I am as much as I want and as high as I can define and as big as I can describe myself. You will be like God. That's what's happening in the paradise, the hill of Eden, when the Satan was having a conversation with Eve. Two issues are at stake. One, forget the death. Eat this, then you will not die. In our version, eat this, death, it will be always somebody else's business. Number two, you will be like God. You will be leading your fate. You don't have to rely on somebody else. The prayer is a ridiculous religious ritual because you become a man and you lead your life as if you are the owner of your life. Do that. And in that, we begin to build the isolations, and a loneliness comes in because I have to prove that I am better than you are in our minds that destroys a sincere, faithful, and truthful relationship between us. I remember in 1970s, these are the good folks that I like their songs very much. In a winter's day, you remember this? In a deep and dark December. Haven't got it yet? No. Oh, come on, I'm singing your generation song. I have my books. Oh, thank you, Matt. And my poetry to protect me. I'm shielded in my armor. You want to come up here and do the solo? Come on, be a man. All right, that's good. Choir is not allowed to sing other than hymns. I touch no one and no one touches me. I am a rock. I am an island. I understand. I identify myself with that so often. But listen to this word. Look at the children. They're the ones who understands. Without saying how I understand, they understand what it means to be the greatest. Is to be the least. The servant is the master. One of the lessons we learn from children is that they always look up. Because of their size of the body, it is quite natural whenever they strike a conversation, it is more than likely they will look up because they are so small. C.S. Lewis was right in The Mere Christianity. The proud man, the arrogant man will always look down, and that's the reason why he never had a chance to look something above. Children's simple physical act tells us enormous meaning of what it means to be humble. Be the servant. Let us be the servant. There is a difference between slave and servant. The slave is the one who offers the labor and follow the order of the owner because of fear. If he doesn't do it, then he will be whipped. He will be locked in and go through the hardship. But if you're a servant, you serve because you love your master. You're a servant because your life is touched and transformed by what Jesus Christ does today in your life. There, your humility stands. You are already great. You know how to be vulnerable in the name of Christ. But in the weakest, like a Darwin's survival of the fittest, the survival of the weakest, survival of the servanthood. Be humble and be servant. Brothers and sisters, the servanthood is not your job description, but it is you. It is you that you may be the greatest in the sight of Christ. Amen.